A look at the legacy of the former Star Trek star Nichelle Nichols, best known for playing Lieutenant Uhura, who's died, aged 89.
There are stories that Hollywood keeps buried for decades, hidden beneath layers of contracts, carefully managed public images, and the unspoken agreement that certain truths are better left unsaid. But sometimes, near the very end of a remarkable life, the weight of those unspoken truths becomes too heavy to carry any longer. That is exactly what happened with Nichelle Nichols, the legendary actress who brought Lieutenant Uhura to life on the original Star Trek series. A woman who spent the better part of half a century being gracious, professional, and carefully measured in what she chose to share with the world. Then, in her final years, she began to speak. And what she said changed everything people thought they knew about one of the most celebrated television productions in American history. Nichelle Nichols was more than an actress. She was a symbol, a living, breathing argument against every stereotype, every limitation, and every closed door that American society had constructed around black women in entertainment. When she appeared on Star Trek in 1966 as Lieutenant Uhura, the communications officer aboard the USS Enterprise, she was doing something that had simply never been done before on American primetime television. She was playing a black woman who was intelligent, authoritative, respected, and indispensable. Not a background figure, not comic relief, not a servant, but a genuine professional operating at the highest level of a fictional future civilization. For millions of viewers, especially young black girls watching from living rooms across the country, that image was nothing short of revolutionary. But behind that image, behind the composed smile, the red uniform, and the communications earpiece, there was a story that Nichols had chosen, for many years, to keep largely to herself. A story about frustration, marginalization, quiet battles, difficult relationships, and the personal cost of being a pioneer in an industry that was not always ready to treat her as one. To understand what Nichelle Nichols faced on the set of Star Trek, you have to understand the world she was walking into. The mid-1960s in America was a period of profound and painful social upheaval. The civil rights movement was reshaping the country's conscience, but Hollywood was moving slowly, dragging its feet the way powerful institutions always do when meaningful change threatens comfortable arrangements. Black actors and actresses, no matter how talented, were still largely confined to roles that reflected the prejudices of the industry rather than the reality of their abilities. Nichols had already proven herself long before Star Trek came calling. She had trained as a dancer and singer from childhood, performing with legendary bandleaders like Duke Ellington and Lionel Hampton. She had appeared on stage in serious theatrical productions, demonstrated genuine dramatic range, and built a reputation as a performer of considerable depth and versatility. She was not a newcomer hoping for a break. She was a seasoned professional who understood exactly what it meant when she was offered the role of Uhura, and she understood, perhaps better than anyone else involved in the production, how much resistance that casting decision might generate. When Star Trek premiered, the response to Uhura was immediate and powerful. Viewers recognized something different about this character. Gene Roddenberry, the creator of the series, had built his vision of the future on the idea that humanity would eventually transcend the divisions that plagued it. That people of all backgrounds, all races, all nationalities would one day work side by side as genuine equals. Uhura was central to that vision. She was not included as a token gesture or a publicity stunt. She was there because Roddenberry genuinely believed in what she represented. But believing in a vision and having the power to fully protect the person carrying that vision are two very different things. And this is where Nichols' private story begins to diverge sharply from the polished public narrative. What Nichols eventually confirmed in her later years was something that fans had long whispered about but never heard directly from her. That despite the groundbreaking nature of her role, she frequently felt sidelined, minimized, and overlooked in ways that were impossible to separate from the color of her skin. She talked about how her lines were regularly cut or reduced, how scripts would arrive and she would find that Uhura, a character who was supposedly a vital member of the Enterprise crew, had been whittled down to a handful of words while other characters carried the dramatic weight of the episode. She described the particular sting of being left out of promotional photographs. While her castmates were featured in the marketing materials that would define the show's public face, Nichols would sometimes find her image absent, as though certain people in the production machinery were quietly, systematically working to reduce her visibility. It was never one dramatic confrontation. It was a pattern of small exclusions, each one individually deniable, but collectively forming an unmistakable picture. She felt, on more than one occasion, that there were people behind the scenes who would have preferred that Lieutenant Uhura occupy as little space as possible. This is the kind of discrimination that is particularly insidious because it operates in the shadows. Nobody ever said anything directly. Nobody put anything in writing. It was the quiet, casual kind of marginalization, the kind that leaves the person experiencing it wondering whether they are imagining things, whether they are being too sensitive, whether they should simply be grateful for what they have and stop asking for more. Nichols was not that kind of woman. She knew what she was seeing. She knew what it meant. And it wore on her in ways that she did not publicly discuss for many, many years. The pressure eventually reached a breaking point. After the first season of Star Trek, Nichols made a decision that, had she followed through on it, would have altered television history in ways we can barely imagine. She decided to leave the show. The offer that pulled her toward the exit was the world she had always truly loved, the stage. Broadway was calling, and after a season of feeling undervalued and pushed to the margins, the theater felt like a place where her talents would be fully recognized and celebrated. She went to Gene Roddenberry and told him she was done. What followed was a conversation that Nichols described as one of the most important of her life. Roddenberry did not argue with her. Her relationship with William Shatner was perhaps the most layered. They had moments of genuine solidarity. The story of the kiss is itself a testament to that. But there were also tensions and misunderstandings that created distance between them. Nichols was careful in how she discussed this, but she made clear that the on-screen partnership between Kirk and Uhura did not translate simply or easily into a warm off-screen friendship. Over time, she said, things improved. Understanding grew between them. But it was not always comfortable or easy. Her relationship with Leonard Nimoy, who played Spock, was something else entirely. Nimoy emerges from Nichols' accounts as a man of genuine decency, someone who recognized what she was dealing with, who treated her as an absolute equal, and who provided consistent support and encouragement during the periods when she felt most marginalized. His respect for her was not performative or conditional. It was simply how he operated. She described his presence on set as a source of real stability during difficult times. George Takei, who played Sulu, was another source of warmth and friendship. DeForest Kelley, who played Dr. McCoy, was a man Nichols described as possessing a kind of quiet, steady goodness, someone who treated everyone around him with fairness and dignity, who never seemed to let the pressures of production infect his basic decency toward other human beings. These relationships, the warm ones and the complicated ones, painted a picture of a working environment that was, like all human environments, a mixture of beauty and difficulty. The beauty was real, but so was the difficulty. And Nichols, in her final years, felt that both parts of that truth deserved to be acknowledged. He did not minimize her frustrations or try to dismiss what she had experienced. He listened, genuinely listened, and then he asked her to do one thing before making her final decision. He asked her to take the weekend, to sit with it, to be absolutely certain. If she still felt the same way on Monday morning, he told her, he would respect her choice completely. That weekend changed everything. The specific circumstances of what happened have become one of the most famous stories in Star Trek history, but hearing Nichols describe it herself, in her own words, with the weight of a life fully lived behind them, carries a power that no retelling can fully capture. She attended a fundraising event organized by the NAACP, and she was told that a fan wanted to meet her. She assumed it would be a typical Star Trek enthusiast. What she found instead was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. standing before her with an expression of deep admiration and genuine emotion. Dr. King did not speak to her as a fan speaks to a celebrity. He spoke to her as one person who understood the weight of history speaks to another. He told her that Star Trek was the only television program he and his wife Coretta allowed their children to watch. He explained that her presence on that show, her specific presence, as a black woman in a position of authority and respect, was not entertainment. It was a statement. It was a demonstration, broadcast into living rooms across a divided nation, that the future could look different from the present. He told her she could not leave. He told her she was doing something that transcended acting. Nichols went back to Roddenberry's office on Monday morning and told him she was staying. If anyone needed proof that Nichelle Nichols understood the historical significance of her position, that she was willing to use it, to push against boundaries even when it was professionally and personally risky to do so, they needed to look no further than what happened in 1968, during an episode of Star Trek titled Plato's Stepchildren. The scene was simple. Captain Kirk and Lieutenant Uhura, under the influence of alien mind control, shared a kiss. A brief, on-screen kiss between a black woman and a white man. In the America of 1968, with racial tensions running at one of the highest temperatures in the nation's history, this was not a simple thing. NBC, the network broadcasting the show, was deeply alarmed. Network executives worried about viewer backlash, about affiliate stations in the South refusing to air the episode, about advertiser pressure and falling ratings. They requested that the scene be reshot without the kiss. Nichols and William Shatner refused. But they went even further than simply refusing. Shatner, according to Nichols' own account, deliberately undermined every alternative take the production attempted. He would make ridiculous faces. He would look in the wrong direction. He would do something, anything, to make the alternative footage unusable. His goal was simple: to ensure that when the editing room made its decisions, the only footage worth broadcasting was the original scene, the one with the kiss. NBC ultimately aired it. The response was not what the network had feared. Letters poured in, overwhelmingly positive, overwhelmingly from viewers who recognized that they had witnessed something meaningful, something brave, something that moved the needle of American culture in the right direction. There were negative letters too. Nichols spoke in her later years about one in particular, from a white Southern man who made clear that he did not approve of what he had seen, yet found himself unable to deny that something significant had occurred. Even his disapproval was a kind of acknowledgement of the scene's power. The kiss was not presented as a romantic choice between the two characters. The alien context of the story gave the network a technical justification for including it. The characters were being controlled, not acting of their own free will. But Nichols always understood, and said so clearly in her later years, that this distinction was irrelevant to the impact of the image. What viewers saw was two people of different races sharing an intimate moment on national television without shame, without punishment, without the story treating it as something aberrant or wrong. That image went straight into the consciousness of a generation. One of the things Nichols became more candid about in her later years was the reality of her relationships with her castmates, a subject she had previously handled with considerable diplomatic care. The truth, as she eventually shared it, was complicated and deeply human.